So we are on the way to have a functioning loot window, but we have to add a few things for it to function as we want it. Because right now we can just play the game and we have one loot showing up. But before we start looting our monsters, I would also like to add the functionality for changing pages. Because right now we are only able to show 4 loots at the time because we only have 4 loot buttons right here. So whenever we drop any more loot than 4, we will have to switch a page so we can see the next loot. And you can see what happens here. If we would go to our loot window and go to add loot, and we would make a for loop here. And let's say we want to show all the loot we have on our loot window right now. Just show it in the loot window. So we can just say items dot length. And then just copy paste the whole thing into the for loop and remove item index. We don't need that anymore, and just replace this with I everywhere. Item index is going to be replaced with I. And I think we also have something out there. Yeah, there we go. And there we go. Okay. So if we save this, it will show some loot, but it will also give us a null reference exception. As you can see, we got the bag, chest, health potion, and the helmet. However, we are getting an index, not null reference, sorry, an index out of range exception. And that's because we're trying to spawn all the items we have. But in our loot window, we have 6 items and we only have room for 4. So there are 2 extra items, which is the shoulders and the sword. So we need to make sure that these 2 items get put on the next page. And to do that, we will have to create a new function for setting or creating pages. And first of all, we need to go to the top of the loot window. In the top of the loot window, we will have to add a new list. Let's see here where we're going to do that. Just to remember, this is for debugging only. In reality, this is going to be a monster we killed that we right click on, and it will send us some items. So instead of the reason that we're using an array right here is because I want to be able to set the items from the unit inspector. We can't serialize a list and do that, so that's why I'm using an array. But actually our function is going to work with lists, so the monster that dies will return a list of items instead of an array. So again, this is only the debugging phase. So what are we going to do? We are going to make a private list. And what kind of list is it? Well, each page is actually a list of items. So on the first page, there's one list of items. When I click the next page, there's going to be another list of items. So we're actually going to make a list of items. Right? So this list will contain all the pages, and each page is a list that contains items. So this might be a little confusing, but as you can see, it looks weird with the syntax like this, but that's how you're creating a list that contains other lists of a specific type. And it's just going to be called pages and just instantiate it like that. So now we have a list that can contain all our pages. The next thing I would like to do is to create a function. Let's see here, just above loot. Let's make a public function. Just need to return anything. And we can call it create pages. Okay. So let's already start to code this so it works whenever we kill a monster. Remember I said that we're not going to use an array of items, we're going to use a list. So let's just say that this function takes in a list of items. So let's say this create pages is called when I kill a monster, I go towards it and I right click on it. The second I right click on the monster, I'm going to loot it. After it's dead, of course. And then it's going to call create pages, which will create the correct amount of pages based on how many items I'm looting from that monster. Maybe it drops nothing, so it's not going to create any pages. Maybe it drops something, so it's going to create pages based on that. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is to make a list. We're going to make a list of items, call it temporary. So this is the list that will be added for or this is basically each page. So we can actually generally have temporary new list. So this will be each page. We can also actually just call it page. Maybe that makes more sense. So we have the page, and we are going to run through all the items that is added here. Let's say it can contain 10 items or it can contain 1 item. If it's 10 items, then it's going to make 3 pages because it's 4 per page. If it's 1 item, it's only going to create one page, for example, right? So based on this, we will have to create some pages. And these pages, each page will be added to the pages list here. So how many times are we going to run? We are going to run as many times as we have items or items in our items list. When we have an item, we add it to our page. So items I. So we look at the first item, we add it to the page. We keep doing this, right? We will add everything to the pages. But at some point, we will need to create a new page, and that's if there is 4. So we have to say if our page.count is 4. If the count is 4, well, then there is a full page. If that's the case, we say pages.add page. Then we add the page. So we just filled out the page with 4, and we take the page and add it to our pages list. And when we've done that, we need to make sure we clear the page. So we say page is equal to new list item. So we just refresh it or recreate the page for us. So now we have a new page created. So we just added the page to the list, and then we create a new one. There's also another condition here. In some cases, we also need to make a new page if we are at the last, what is it called? The last item, right? So we have to make an else and say I equals items.count -1. So this makes sure that we will add the last item to a page and show it on the list. If we don't do this, it will not run this code here for adding the page to the list, because here it will only add the page to the list of pages if there are 4 items. But imagine if we have 6 items that dropped, then it's not going to add the 2 last items, 5 and 6, because we're looking for something with equals 4. But in a case where we add item 6 and there are no more items, then we're simply going to add the page anyway. So this makes sure that we will also be able to add pages that doesn't have 4 items on them, like 1, 2, 3, for example. I hope that made sense. Maybe I was bad at explaining it. So here we are just creating pages. It's very simple. We create pages based on the amount of items we have. And when that's done, we say add loot. Okay, so we need to make some changes to add loot, and we need to do it add a few things, but I'll do it one by one. So we won't have a full functioning page swap right now, but we will try to add the items and show the items on one page first, and then we will add the functionality for swapping pages later, or changing pages. So the first thing we have to check if our pages.count is larger than 0. So if the pages count is 0, then we don't have any loot. So there is a chance that a monster will die and not drop any loot. And this is the check that makes sure that we don't try to show some loot that doesn't exist. Okay, so all this code here in the for loop needs to go into the if statement. And for this to work, we will have to create a new field up here. Let's make a private field, which is an integer called page index. So what is page index? It's going to keep track of the current page we're on. So when we just open up the loot window, page index will be equal to 0, which is the first page. And then when we press the next button, it will be changed to 1, so we know we need to show the loot on page 1. So page 1 is actually 0 and page 1 is 2, but however, it's 0 index because that's how this works. Because then we can use this page index directly to access the items. Because remember, we were putting them into pages right here. So page 1 is actually on index 0, which means if page index is 0, then we can just access all the items on index 1, which is the first page. Or index 0, which is the first page, I mean. Okay, so to sum up, page index is going to work as a bookmark for what page we are on, basically. So we can use that bookmark to show the items on a page. And how do we do that? Well, let's see. This for loop needs to be changed a little. We need to check our pages, page index, count. So we are looking into the pages. What pages are we at? We are at page 0, and we're taking the count of whatever is on page 0. So if 3 items dropped, well, then page 0 has 3 items. If 10 items drops, then page 0 will have 4 items. So this is where we are actually opening the book, looking at the bookmark, and finding the actual items we need to show there. We also need to make sure that the item that we're trying to show isn't null. So we say pages, page index, and what is on spot I, and we need to make sure that it isn't null. So by creating this, we avoid null reference errors if an item has been deleted or looted already, so we don't get like any null references. Yeah. And then we take everything in here and cut it and paste it inside this if statement, just to make sure that it works. Okay, so with this done, we can try to save and see what happens when we play our game here. Let's see if oh wait, we're not calling the functionality, I was getting ahead of myself. Let's see here. We have our create pages and we need to call that. So let's delete add loot from start and call create pages. But wait a minute, we don't have a list, so we're just going to do this. This is just for debugging. We are saying for loop, and we're going to say items dot length, is it? Yeah, I always mix up length and count. And then we're going to make a list here of items and call it temporary and instantiated. So then we're going to take all the items from item and put them into a list. So we're going to temporary.add items dot OI, like that. I don't think there is a items. This is something array. Doesn't matter. We made our own loop. I think maybe there is some functionality for converting an array or copying an array to a list in the array class, but now we just did it ourselves. Doesn't matter. So we're going to say temp and put it right there. So what we're doing now is just create a list of all the items. So this list will contain 6 items. We're going to get them to create pages, so it will create 2 pages, one with 4 on it and one with 2 items on it. And then we're going to call add loot here and show the first page. So let's see. And there we go. So now we have the first page without any null reference errors. This button doesn't work right now, so we need to add that as well. But now we can actually show a page. Before we start swapping pages, let's just get the UI in place. There's one thing we forgot to add actually. Forgot to add the UI for showing the current page we are on actually. And that UI should also be added to the loot window, of course. So we can right click on the loot window and say UI and text and rename this to page text, or page number actually. That's the page number, and let's just set it up, change the font to whatever font you want, white, and I don't know, do you want some outline on it maybe? Put some outline on it and then just take it and place it in the bottom here. And make it small so it doesn't go over the edges of that, and just make sure that it is centered like that. I'm not sure if you want it lower. You can just adjust it as you want. Okay, so that's my page. Let's just say 1/1 right now. That's the standard. There we go. Okay, so we can go to our loot window, and here we have to make sure we have a reference to that text. So let's see. Let's make a private text. Right click, quick actions, using unit.ui, page number. Serialize the field. Go down here. So now we can start. Actually, yeah, we also need something else. We need to have a reference to the next and the previous button. Because right now we need to show them and hide them based on what we can see. Because right now, when we play the game, we can just see the previous button, even though we can't go this way. There's no way we can go to the left. And this one, even though it shows that we only have one page. So we have to go in here and make a reference to those two buttons. So let's make a private game object. And let's call it next button and previous button. So here we have those, and we're just going to serialize them. And when we've done that, we can actually start to change the UI a little. So whenever we spawn something, we need to show how many pages we have first of all. So let's say page number text equals page index plus 1 plus slash, I'll explain in a second, page count, or pages count there. Okay, so what does this do? Well, we set the page number text equal to the page index plus 1, because page index is 0 if there's one page, so we just add 1 so we don't get a 0 out of 1. So instead we get 1 out of 1, for example. And this is the count of pages. Let's say we have one page, well then the count is 1. So count is not 0 indexed. Count is how many there are. Which means if I will play it now, it will write, oh, I forgot to set up the reference. Let's just do that for everything. Loot window. So here we have a page number, and we have a next button, and we have a previous button. There we go. Let's try to play again. Now it shows I have page 1 out of 2 right there. Okay. So we page 1 out of 2 in place. We can go down and make sure that we are showing and hiding the right buttons. So let's make an if statement here. Let's say previous. Actually, we can do like this: previous button dot set active. This wants a Boolean value, so we can just say if our page index is larger than 0. So based on the page index larger than 0, we will show the next button or previous button. Okay, so we have our next dot set active. And we can also just put the what's it called, Boolean statement in here. If the pages that count is larger than 1, so if we have more than one page, then we are most likely to show the next button, right? And our page index is less than pages that count minus 1. So what does this check do? This check makes sure that we don't have a next button when we are on the last page. So basically that check just checks if we are on the last page. If we are not, then we can show a next button. If we are on the last page, then we don't need to show a next button. So this code here will handle, it will handle page numbers, and this one will handle the buttons, showing and hide them. And as you can see, we also check what our page index is. So which means if I go to the next one, it shouldn't show the button. But we can see that in a sec. So let's see, we drop the loot. Oh, we can't go to the left now because there's nothing to the left of this. But however, we should be able to go to the right when we add the functionality for it. So those are two things that works now. So let's create the functions for next and previous page. I'm going to make a public function called next page. And then we're going to make a public function also, returns void, called previous page, just like that. Okay. Before we can write these two functions, we'll have to create another function, and it's going to be called clear buttons. So what is clear buttons used for? Whenever we change our page, we need to make sure that the buttons are hidden, because actually let's just wait with including this, then you can see why we need it. Yeah, so what do we do here? We say if our page indexed, this is the next one, is less than pages that count -1. So if our page index is less than the pages count -1, which means if our page index isn't the last page, so we check if we have more pages, basically, and then we say page index ++, and then we add the loot. We add the loot based on the page index. What are we going to do with the previous? We are going to say if our page index is larger than 0. If it's larger than 0, then we are not on the first page. So basically we're checking if we have more pages. Yeah, if we have more pages to go backwards to. So if we have more pages in backwards direction, then we say page index minus, and we say add loot, like that. Before we save and test this, there's one thing we need to fix, because I made a mistake up here in add loot. I made a mistake when I was writing the code here for all the pages, because I forgot to change out or switch out the items. Right here we're using the items array, but we're not supposed to. We are actually supposed to use the pages array. So we actually have to copy that, pages, page index, and replace it with items, and keep the I afterwards. So this is how the lines are going to look. Also in the title here, we are also using items. We also need to use pages, page index here, as we do that. So to make sure that you have done this correct, you can go all the way to the top and find your items array and comment it out. And then you should only receive 2 errors. One for inside the for loop and one for outside the for loop in start. And this is only for debugging. We will soon enough be deleting this, but we just need this right now to test if everything works with the loot window. So I hope you understood that we need to make sure that we're using pages page index here all the time instead of the items. Before we can test it, we will have to set up the next and the previous button. Select the next button. Go to the onClick function and click the plus. Take the loot window and drag down here. Select no function, loot window, and find the next page. Same goes for the previous. Take the loot window. Click the plus first. Take the loot window, drag here, no function, loot window, and find the previous page. So now you have assigned previous and next page. And of course, make sure that everything is saved before you test it. Let's see what happens. We have a lot of loot here. There should be 6 items all in all. But when I press the next button, it gives me the shoulders and the unbreakable sword. But the health potion and the awesome helmet is still there, which is also on the first page. So why is it that some of the items, even though we only have 6, are copied to the next page? That's because we're never clearing our items. When we change a page, we will have to clear the items from the previous page, in case that some of the items, or we don't have as many items on the next one, because as you can see, these 2 items are switched out, but the ones down here are never removed. So you can see I can loot them twice. I can loot them 1 for each page, and now they keep popping up again because we haven't fixed everything for doing that. But we need to make sure that the pages are cleared. So how do we do that? Well, we need to create a function. I think I created it before. I just removed it by mistake, I guess. If you haven't created it, just create the function called clear buttons. Make it public void clear buttons. I think I created the skeleton for it before, but might have pressed Ctrl C to delete it. So clear buttons, what does it do? It has a for each loop that runs through the loot buttons. In loot buttons, and then it takes the button and take the game object and set it to active to false, like that. So with that done, we can save, go back to Unity, and let's see what happens. There is 4 items. I click the next button, and oh, I never called the clear function, so that was underwhelming. Let's try again. Before we write add loop, we say clear buttons right there. And the same goes for the previous place. Clear buttons. There we go. So now we save and try again. And we have the loot. We press next. And boom, now we only have 2 weapons or 2 things. And boom, we have the correct loot. So now it shows the correct loot from each page. As you can see, I'm page 1 out of 2, 2 out of 2. The buttons also work. I can't press this way now. I can't press that way now. So now we have back and forth movement or page swapping on our loot window. What else? If I loot something and go back and forth, it will show up again. So of course we need to remove it at some point, but there's no reason for us or no point for us to go and remove it now, because we will remove it from the monster when we loot it, so that it does show up again when we change pages or open and close the window. So I think we're going to keep it like this for now until we actually add the loot the loot function. So that's what I want to show in this video. Thank you very much for watching.